Open the podcast bay doors, Hal.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 98 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits, but I've found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. I forgot to include my monthly shoutouts last month, although they were written out on the YouTube version of the last episode, so consider this August's thank yous, and later this month will be September's official thanks. As always, my sincere gratitude goes out to all my patrons: Jesse Clark, Lily Breen, Ricky Garvin, Rob Garrison, Forrest Woodward, Aaron Borst, Carla Hoffman, Lyndon Onstead, Julio Herrera, Matthew Saint, and Utuk Zool. Remember, it's just $1 per month to join in and get this monthly shoutout, as well as full scripts of the shows and audio outtakes. Now, on to the show. Last episode, I talked a bit about Wally West taking over the Flash name from Barry Allen, a change that lasted 30 years. Well, that reminded me that it had been a while since I had done one of the Replacements episodes, where I discuss all the characters that have taken on another's heroic mantle, and what happens to them when the original returns. There's an upcoming storyline that features the return of one of these replacements, so this seemed like a good time to discuss the characters who have, for one reason or another, taken the name Spider-Man. As always, thanks go out to Justin, who asked the original question that inspired this ongoing series of episodes. Like many characters with a secret identity, there have been a few times that another hero would wear Spider-Man's suit and appear in the same place as Peter Parker in order to deflect away accusations of Peter being Spider-Man. But as usual, we're going to ignore those little one-shot appearances and focus on the characters that have become the primary focus of the Spider-Man title or titles for a significant period of time. And over the years, there have been 3 of those, starting with the most infamous among comic book fans, and that is Ben Reilly, aka the clone of Spider-Man. As you've heard from other Replacements episodes, the 90s was basically the peak period for these stories where the original hero goes through some traumatic experience that forces him or her to leave their role and get replaced for some indeterminate length of time. And sure enough, it's 1994 that we get the beginning of what has become known as the Clone Saga. Although Ben's history actually goes back to almost 20 years before that, first appearing in Amazing Spider-Man number 149, written by Jerry Conway and drawn by Ross Andrew. The villain known as the Jackal, aka Professor Miles Warren, cloned Spider-Man and forced the original and clone to fight each other, with neither knowing for sure which was the clone. During the ensuing battle, both the Jackal and the Spider-Man we assume to be the clone end up being crushed by rubble and apparently die. Spider-Man dumps the body of the clone in a smokestack, hoping it will remove any evidence. He has some brief soul-searching where he questions whether or not he is actually the clone, but pretty quickly decides he is the original. And that's where the story ended in the 70s. However, In later retcons, slowly revealed over the 2-year Clone Saga storyline, we find out that the clone actually was alive, having survived both the wall collapsing on him as well as the drop into the inactive smokestack. Eventually coming to, he returned to Peter Parker's apartment only to see through the window that Peter was already there with Mary Jane Watson. Rather than go through another fight, the clone left New York, taking on the name Ben Reilly, the first name coming from Uncle Ben, with Riley being Aunt May's maiden name. Years later, upon hearing that Aunt May had had a stroke that put her in a coma, and that she was unlikely to awake and recover, although she did, Ben returned to New York to see her one last time. Around this time, all of the trauma in Peter's life had been taking a toll on him, causing him to break down in fits of rage and even occasionally refer to Peter and Spider-Man as separate people. Seeing Peter's state of mind, Ben decided to stick around New York and keep an eye on things, dyeing his hair blonde to help differentiate himself from Peter. Of course, this being New York in the Marvel Universe, Ben got involved in superhero fights, although he really hadn't done much superheroing in the intervening time. Making an all-red costume with the addition of a blue hoodie, Ben was named the Scarlet Spider by the press. Now, recapping the whole Clone Saga could be its own separate podcast, and actually has. Do a search on Clone Saga Chronicles if you want to dive deep on this subject. But I'll touch on the most relevant parts. Tests revealed that Ben was actually the original and Peter was the clone. Around the same time, Mary Jane was revealed to be pregnant. For these reasons, among others, Peter decides to hang up the webs and hands the Spider-Man name to Ben for a time. This was pushed as a permanent change by the powers that be at Marvel, to the point that Ben was even the Spider-Man in the massive 1996 DC vs. Marvel miniseries. But after multiple editorial shakeups at Marvel, and a lot of fan backlash, it was decided to bring Peter back as the one true Spider-Man. And in the finale of that storyline, Ben experienced the cellular degeneration that had killed off nearly every other clone that had appeared so far, and he melted into a pile of goo. However, even dissolving into goo isn't permanent enough for comic books, and almost 20 years later, these things come in cycles, we find out that Ben's remains, such as they were collected by the Jackal, who once again cloned Ben, even preserving his memories up to and including the moment of his death. However, the process was flawed, and it took 26 times to get Ben back into a stable body. The memory of 26 different deaths broke Ben's mind for a while, and after breaking free and defeating Professor Warren, Ben took on the Jackal name himself. He worked to perfect the cloning process, which he used to cure people of fatal diseases by actually killing them and cloning a healthy body, seeing the clones as a continuation of the original person rather than a new individual. Whether or not he's right is a question for philosophers. The original Spider-Man gets involved, and the two end up fighting, as usual, which ends with Peter sacrificing his then-successful company's flagship product in order to prevent a plague from spreading across the world that Ben would have used to replace everyone on Earth with his reanimates, as he calls them. During this final battle, the Jackal/Ben nearly died, but ended up surviving, albeit scarred. He soon left New York again, moving to Las Vegas and slowly recovering his body and soul, taking on the Scarlet Spider persona again in a 25-issue long series written by Peter David and drawn by a number of artists, starting with Mark Bagley and William Sliney taking over art for the majority of issues. Since the cancellation of that series, Ben has been seen briefly in the Iron Man book, enlisted by Tony Stark to help him rescue James Rhodes. However, Ben is set to make a big return to the Spider-Man books soon. In one of the free comic book day offerings from Marvel this year, Ben is seen in a new Spider-Man costume with lots of new inventions to help him in his crime fighting. We find out in this story that Ben has just started working with the Beyond Corporation in order to take a more proactive and organized approach to being a superhero. The Beyond Corporation is a fairly recent addition to the Marvel Universe, comparatively speaking, first appearing in 2006, and has been fairly evil in its actions, although even some of the company's employees start out believing the corporation is acting benevolently at first, so we'll have to wait and see which side of the moral spectrum Ben ends up on this time. From a hero turned villain, turned hero again, we now reverse that process with one of Spider-Man's earliest nemeses, Dr. Octopus. In Dan Slott's epic run on the Amazing Spider-Man title, we find that Otto Octavius's health is quickly declining, as too many blows from superpowered beings over the years have caused permanent damage. Doc Ock has a plan, however, which he ends up carrying out successfully, where he ends up swapping bodies with Spider-Man, leaving Peter to die in Ock's withered husk, while Otto lives on in Peter's healthy body. In the transfer process, though, the two end up seeing each other's lives, and Peter's mantra, "with great power comes great responsibility," moves Otto, and the former villain decides to do what he can to become a hero. While he works to do good things, Octavius's ego is still intact, and he dubs himself the Superior Spider-Man, a title that the book carried for 31 issues. Creating the company Parker Industries, and using his intellect to invent many new crime-fighting devices, this Superior Spider-Man lived up to his name in many ways, although his personality and more cruel, and in some cases lethal, methods tended to rub against other heroes, causing him to lose his Avengers membership and fall out of favor generally in the hero community. It takes some time, but Peter's personality, hidden away in the recesses of his brain, is able to eventually reassert itself, and Doc Ock's consciousness seemingly sacrifices himself, acknowledging that Peter is actually the Superior Spider-Man. However, a copy of Ock's consciousness from before this realization was kept stored away, and during the same storyline where Ben became the Jackal, Otto is able to get his mind downloaded into another clone of Peter. Although this version of Otto at first ends up working with Hydra, he still held on to some of Peter's memories and sense of responsibility, so ends up defending Aunt May, who is also his former fiancée, which is another story in and of itself, from an attack by the Red Goblin, Norman Osborn fused with the Carnage symbiote. Peter declares that Otto now has a clean slate, letting him go free. Otto creates a new identity as Dr. Elliot Tolliver, and ends up in San Francisco, where he once again fights on the side of good as the Superior Spider-Man. Unfortunately, this doesn't last long. The second run of Superior Spider-Man ran 12 issues, and now, thanks to a deal with Mephisto, something Spider-Men are apparently wont to do, Otto is back in his original body, unscarred by his previous encounters with superheroes, but also missing the effects of the original mind transfer with Peter that pushed him towards the heroic side. Currently in the comics, the Sinister War storyline is going on, with Doc Ock reforming the Sinister Six at the behest of Kindred, who has promised to help Ock recover the missing memories he lost in his various mind and body swaps. Now we finally get to the third replacement, although by my usual rules he shouldn't count, as this character never replaced Peter Parker in the main continuity. However, I would be remiss in discussing Spider-Man replacements if I didn't bring up Miles Morales, who moviegoers may know as the lead in the much-acclaimed Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse animated film. Miles first appeared in the Ultimate Universe. You may remember me mentioning this in previous episodes, but as a quick recap, the Ultimate books presented an alternative universe originally published as a way of bringing in new readers unburdened by 40-plus years of continuity. As the books racked up their own continuity, these titles morphed into a place where the writers could present stories that were too extreme to happen in the main continuity. One such tale was the death of Peter Parker. In issue number 160 of Ultimate Spider-Man, Peter laid down his life in order to defeat Green Goblin. Meanwhile, young Miles ended up bitten by a similarly genetically engineered spider, gaining powers that mostly mirrored Peter's, although not identically so. In addition to improved strength, agility, and a spider sense, Miles can also use a camouflage power to basically turn himself invisible, and also can shock people usually into unconsciousness with what he calls his Venom Strike, although it's pure energy and doesn't involve poison or venom in any way. Although reluctant at first to use his powers as a crime fighter, after Peter's death, Miles does take on the Spider-Man mantle, creating his own unique costume in order to differentiate himself from the deceased original. Eventually, the Ultimate books were cancelled, but Miles has survived that publishing line dying as he was transferred into the main universe during the 2015 semi-soft reboot storyline called Secret Wars. Peter and Miles are friends and allies in the current continuity, and the young hero has even been one of the Avengers, although right now he is a founding member of the Champions, a super team of younger heroes I've mentioned a few times before. In addition to the people who have taken Spider-Man's place, Spider-Man himself has taken on multiple other costume personas over the years, and some of those uniforms have ended up in other characters' hands. But that's a long enough list that it could be its own episode. If you're interested in hearing about that, or have any other topic you would like covered, let me know. You can send any and all of those, or any other feedback via email to welcome2geektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, welcome to, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you prefer to ask more anonymously. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcome-to-geektown or Twitter @geektownpodcast. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, come join the Patreon at patreon.com/welcome-to-geektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show so we can all tell them, welcome to Geektown, population, us. Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Lovitz, logo art by Tree Santana. All other sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.